wait. Some of the some of the Americas is definitely not where it's at. But People's Summit for Democracy, well, I thought that's where it's at. And then we got a little bit on the postscript to the story today that we're going to have to cover towards the end here. But this story works that it's a progressive vision to counter U.S. dominance. And this was in the L.A. Progressive and Popular Resistance. It was written in L.A. Progressive, picked up by Popular Resistance, our friends over there, talking about the People's Summit for Democracy. Okay, and you've got this wonderful picture that happened out front. Okay, talking about that Biden's insistence on continuing the U.S. policy of exclusion and aggression against Latin America has made his summit a failure before it's even begun. Sure. So then you've got the U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for Western Hemisphere Affairs asking, will Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua be invited? And of course, with neither hesitation nor equivocation, that answer was no. Speaking on behalf of President, okay, he further added countries whose actions do not respect democracy, as the U.S. government views these three countries and others like them, will not receive invitations. And his seemingly offhand comment, said with the usual arrogance of U.S. officials calling the three countries regimes that do not respect democracy, sent a shockwave through the region that the U.S. was likely not expecting. And throughout Latin America, the reaction was immediate and swift. Leaders such as AMLO, Bolivian President Luis Arce. Where'd that come from?
One sec.
Thank you, Siri.
Still trying.
Yeah, thanks. I have to turn on the other computer. I'm like, wait, where's that noise coming from? Sorry, I have another computer that's not lighting up and fixing this. Anyway.
What?
So, Bolivian President Arce, Honduran President Castro, as well as several other heads of state from Caribbean countries, CARICOM, including Antigua, and Barbuda's Prime Minister Gaston Brown, and Trinidad and Tobago's Prime Minister Keith Rowley, all expressed that they would not participate in the summit if the exclusions of Cuba, Venezuela, Nicaragua were maintained. CARICOM has called for a summit that ensures the participation of all countries of the hemisphere.
Okay.
Well, Biden's insistence on continuing the U.S. policy of exclusion and aggression against Latin America has made his summit a failure before it's even begun. Mired in controversy and criticism, they have not been able to build consensus around any common agenda because of the double standards it creates. Sure.
Yep.
While the U.S. may have already moved on, memories of recent coups and interventionist plots by the U.S. government in the region are still fresh. The U.S. and the OAS both helped engineer a coup in Bolivia in 2019 that overthrew a democratically elected government, put in the Áñez government.
Yep.
Okay, so the summit, since its inception, has been met with skepticism by progressives across Latin America due to the outsized, or more accurately, domineering role played by the U.S. and OAS with regard to invitations, agenda, and vision. However, this year, the U.S. seems to have underestimated the important political shifts in the region and their impact on the political legitimacy of the U.S. So, we don't seem to have anticipated any challenges to our leadership of the summit, but pushback against U.S. hegemony comes as no surprise to most Latin Americans and those around the world who've been following the region's politics of late. Since the last summit in 2018, the political map has undergone radical transformations, not only in progressive governments outnumbering reactionary ones across the region, but many of them have emerged precisely out of a deep rejection of U.S.-backed governments and policies and the conditions they create for the people. Well, and we can name a few of them. I mean, look at what's happened in Bolivia, right?
Yeah.
And then you've got Brazil.
Guaido, and yeah, I mean, you could just pick a Latin American country, and we've tried to meddle there.
Guaido was installed, but I'm talking about when they have the chance to democratically elect. I mean, Boric is to the left, and all of these, again, he's turning out to be more neoliberal than they thought, but that's not what they thought they were getting. Again, Xiomara Castro also to the left, and our friend Who am I thinking of? Bolivia. Um, Moss Party. I'm
Yeah.
losing.
I'll look it up.
I'm losing the name. Wow. Sorry. So, again, across the region, countries whose public sectors, and again, I'm sure they'll mention him because he's one of the most influential leaders there is. Across the region, countries whose public sectors.
Arce is the minister.
Arce. That's in Bolivia. That's not who I was thinking of.
Yeah. That's Moss Party though, so.
He's in the Moss Party. Okay. Across the region, countries whose public sectors are undermined for decades by U.S. and IMF-imposed neoliberal policies saw their societies and economies devastated during COVID-19. According to the UN, the extreme poverty rate in the region rose from 13.1 to 13.8% just over a year, representing a setback of 27 years. And more than 2.7 million deaths from COVID. The Americas represent 43.6% of global COVID deaths, despite constituting only 12% of the world population. Part of that, the outliers, it's kind of funny, in this general trend of economic crisis and humanitarian emergency were Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua, which suffered some of the lowest rates of deaths from COVID in the world, due to their comprehensive strategies of, above all else, putting the health and well-being of their citizens before profit. Okay? That this policy was extended beyond their national borders from as early as March 2020. Cuba was already sending medical brigades to countries across the region and the world to support their responses to COVID. The legendary Cuban doctors that are flying to Italy trying to help. Okay, with Cuba's development of 5 vaccines against COVID, the countries work closely with other global South countries to distribute vaccine science and technology to promote localized production and distribution. Meanwhile, U.S. pharmaceutical biotech companies like Pfizer and Moderna were turning record profits and not sharing with the global South and the third world, and the poorer nations, Africa. At the height of the pandemic in Brazil, Venezuela sent oxygen to the city of Manaus, which had run out of the vital supply, despite pleading for federal aid from the Brazilian government under Bolsonaro.
Yep.
It's become glaringly clear that countries in the region have everything to gain from maintaining cooperation and partnerships with the countries the U.S. declares to be its enemies. So, the U.S. excuses its aggressive policy against these 3 countries by citing their alleged human rights violations and the so-called threats that these countries pose to democracy. When,
right?
What? Yeah. So, what kind of democracy exists in a country where 1 million people have died from COVID, 2.2 million people are in prison, where police kill an average of 3 people a day, almost all of them black people, almost 3 black people, three times more likely to be killed than white people, and where $800 billion a year just this year is being spent on the military, which is making up 38% of global military spending. I mean, it's insane. So, here's where the People's Summit comes in. They carry forward the legacy of movements against neoliberal capitalism and U.S. imperialism that have organized counter summits every time the U.S. organizes its Summit of the Americas. So the People's Summit's going to be held in L.A. on June 8th through 10th. That's just in a few days. Okay, and seeks to bring together voices of the people whom the U.S. would prefer to silence and exclude. Immigrant organizers in L.A. will take the stage with landless rural workers from Brazil to discuss their visions for democracy for all. Feminist organizers from Argentina to New York are going to share strategies on how to fight for abortion access and counter the reactionary right-wing attacks on women and LGBTQ people.
Right.
These unprecedented times call for more cooperation and less exclusion. These have a lot of neoliberal kind of talking points dripped in. We're going to, again, talk phrasing. About the neoliberal phrasing and the less exclusion. Well, unfortunately, the U.S. government also denied the visas of a 23-person delegation of Cuban civil society to the People's Summit. The bonds between the Cuban people and the people of the Americas are unbreakable. And despite their best efforts, the U.S. cannot silence the aspirations of the people. That sounds very flowery. For the Americas, which are on the cusp of transformative times, the age of the Monroe Doctrine is over. And I tend to agree with that. And again, People's Summit for Democracy, definitely better than the Summit for Americas. However, let's go back to a two-shot for 1 second, and let me fix and go back and hit escape. And let's go to the Twitter today.
Yeah, you're pulling that up.
I'm not going to show it to anybody because it was in a DM thread, but I'm going to read it.
Well, you can pull up her picture.
Because it's relevant.
There. She put up like a big blue picture that like.
Yes, she did. Oh, that's true. She did. Okay, and we're talking about our friend and the wonderful journalist Fiorella Isabel from the Convo Couch. She put up the website. She put up the website from the People's Summit themselves, and she's planning on covering it. So what she put up is their COVID and masking policy, which is that all participants must be vaccinated and present a vaccination card or proof of a negative COVID test within 72 hours upon arrival. See COVID-19 protocols here. All participants must wear masks indoors. Masks may be removed while actively eating or drinking and while outdoors. There will also be exceptions made for panelists, speakers, and performers while on stage to ensure they can be heard and understood. So apparently COVID doesn't happen on stage, only in the crowd.
Right.
So
but only the crowd can like give you the cooties.
Right.
It's only the poor people that spread it around.
California Department of Public Health recommends wearing a mask with good fit and filtration. This includes surgical masks and respirators like N95s, KN95s, and KF94s. Not the surgical masks, and certainly not a cloth mask or a gaiter, which has been shown to not really be very effective. So, that was, COVID apparently disappears when you're a panelist on stage, and I'm not sharing this with anybody else but us. But holy moly, that's no bueno. So that does not bode very well, but a lot of the same kind of language that we're hearing from. Again, we're trying to be inclusive, and I feel that. I do.
Right.
So I actually reached out to the people for the which one is it? The People's Summit for Democracy. And we want to get some kind of media credentials. We're not going to have anybody on the ground in LA personally for Indie Left or for INN. Not to my knowledge, at least, unless maybe Marcus wants to pop over there. But they sorry, last minute. So they sent me like all the press release stuff, and they said, okay, you can sign up and check out stuff here. So we're going to be getting updates from them, and we're going to be following the story and seeing exactly how they treat people. Are they going to be like exclusionary toward people who are unvaccinated but have tested negative? I would hope not.
You would think, but
the whole mask requirement thing is really weird. I mean, I went to Las Vegas 2 months ago at a trade show, and nobody's wearing masks. I mean, that's pretty general public stuff, and I know we're talking about California, but it can be certainly optional, but masks required for every attendee. Okay, guys, and like N95, KN95 type of stuff recommended.
Right.
But I'm sure they're going to provide you with like the cloth surgical one with a box of it right out front, even though they know it's so. I don't want to even talk about this because who knows what's going to happen with. Sorry, YouTube overlords.
Sorry,
YouTube overlords.
I think everyone kind of knows already at this point. Even YouTube is kind of relaxed, I think, on it. But
okay, so I mean, the hypocrisy and the selectiveness is just.